part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. Part of the Press Play Podcast Network, we read one book a month and then we talk about it. Today, we're here to discuss our November 2021 book, Greenwood by Michael Christie. Published by Hogarth in February 2020, this is a seriously epic tale that spans like 130 years. But most months, I usually pick our book club book. But this month, which is November, actually book club members shared suggestions and then we drew 3 options out of a hat and then we voted on one and we ended up picking Greenwood. And that's how this became our book of the month. But I have to give credit where credit is due because Nick put in the suggestion for Greenwood, but he said he got the idea from Carrie, who had read the book before. And Carrie is here to chat with us today about Greenwood. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. And thanks for recommending this book to Nick, who was smart enough to write it down and put it in a hat.
I have to credit him for being so bold as to put one of my suggestions because you never know what you're going to get when you suggest something before reading it, which is tough.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's tough. Where did you hear about this book and when did you read it?
So I read this book in August and I heard about it from another friend who had read it and she had really good things to say about it. I didn't know what it was about, but she was like, it's a really good book. And I feel like I typically, try to get people's recommendations instead of just choosing blindly. So I guess it was really word of mouth.
That's great. I love that. Is this a friend who has given you good recommendations in the past?
Yes, she is.
So you were like, okay, all right, I'll read it without knowing what it's about or like looking into it anymore.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad that you suggested it. You read it physically. You didn't listen to it, right?
Right.
So this book, I kind of agree with your friend, which is like, I hear Thomas.
Oh no.
Is he mad?
He's just not napping. He's like, how dare you?
Yeah. He's like, can I be on the podcast?
Yeah.
What's Thomas's favorite book, Carrie? Does he have one?
Oh, his favorite book is The Pout Fish.
Is it really?
Yeah, he really likes it. I think
okay.
To be honest, he's just, I think, drawn to, the colors and the fact that I'm reading from it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was per you.
Okay. It is really like people are going to think we just staged that conversation. This was organic. This is authentic. This is happening live in the moment. Thomas yelled in the background and now a plug for the Pout Fish. That's amazing.
He's a fan. He's a big fan.
Oh, that's so cute. That was December last year, actually, that we talked about our book recommendations. And my cousin, Mallory, who is also a new mom, recommended the Pout Fish. I'm so glad to see other book club members having a great time with that.
It's truly a world of sharing.
Okay, so I was going to say, Carrie, that I think I agree with your friend, which is like, almost like the less you know about this book, the better.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to, it's a very epic book. There's like a lot that happens. There's a ton of characters. It spans like 130 years. It's hard to sum it up.
Right.
Like if I tell you it's about a future world where there's like only a few forests left, that's true, but it's also about so much more than that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Forrest Gump, play on words with the forest, but where it's like this person's life and you don't actually know, like, I guess I saw Forrest Gump not knowing what it was about. And then it was similarly like this long saga of someone's life and all the things that happen. And yeah, this book is obviously a larger span, especially with different characters in the same family and through time. But interestingly enough, it's kind of the same where, I really wouldn't know how I would describe it similarly to Forrest Gump. I'm like, well, it's just about this family at the core of it.
Yeah. Yeah. At the core of it, it's definitely a family, like generational drama, I guess. I love your Forrest Gump analogy. Yeah, I can totally see it. That's great. Yeah. So I kind of think, I was like, I was thinking before we started recording, like, how are we going to even do a plot like summary for this book? I don't really know. Because there's so many characters. It's so huge and like encompassing. But I think maybe a way to talk about this book is to talk about it the way it's written, which it has this really interesting format, which is a timeline. But the timeline goes forward and then backward again. And there's this like very beautiful drawing of a tree, of the rings of a tree. And then it's also got the dates on there, like at each ring that would represent that year. Anyways, so they're saying that the timeline, and I read this in a few reviews, and this is how they described it. The timeline is like the rings of a tree. So you go like 2038, 2008, 1974, 1934, 1908. And then you go up again, 1934, 1974, 2008, 2038, like the rings of a tree. Wow.
I thought it was just a beautiful way of describing like the way the book was going to be written. For the reader, sometimes I think books are written in a very interesting format, but you don't know until you start reading it. And then it's like you read the first chapter and then the second chapter starts and you're like, oh, okay, this is a format thing, whatever the change may be. But I like that in Greenwood, they kind of, Michael Christie told you right away, like, this is how it's going to be. So, you kind of expected that. And then it just worked so well going along with the rings of a tree, visually being able to see the way the story was going to be laid out.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was very beautiful and very brilliant. And yeah, I definitely liked as a reader, I liked knowing where we were going next. Like which year would be next, even though I obviously didn't know what was going to happen in that year. It was like a good roadmap. I liked having that. And if I felt like I got lost sometimes, which I think that's one of my critiques of this book, is that I did get lost sometimes. I could at least look back and see, well, okay, what year am I in? Okay, that's helpful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very creative.
Yeah. So I feel like it might make sense to just sort of talk through our characters, our main characters for each year, or like each time period. So we open in 2038, so like the near future, with our character Jake Greenwood, who is the forest guide at one of the last remaining forests in the world in British Columbia. So that's one of our main characters. Then you go to 2008 and we meet Liam Greenwood, who I don't know if we know, but we think, I guess we maybe just assume, is Jake's father. Also, Jake is a woman, Jacinda. She goes by Jake. So cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Then we meet Liam. Then we go to 1974 and we meet Willow, who is Liam's mom. And then we go from 1974 back to 1934. And then we meet like a whole host of characters, including Everett Greenwood, Harvey Lomax, Liam Feeney, Temple, and Harris Greenwood. There's like a lot of characters in that section that I think are really important. And then in 1908, which is our like farthest back in time that we go, it's sort of the center of the tree. This chapter is so interesting to me because it's written in the perspective of the entire town. Like it's a collective we narration. And it was really weird to start reading that. But once I was in it, I loved it.
Yeah.
So then we meet young Everett and Harris Greenwood, who live in this small town. And we're taught about them by like the Greek chorus that is the town.
It's amazing. I mean, there were so many characters, to be honest. I feel like when we hit 1934, there's so many people. It took a second to keep track.
Yes.
There were so many characters, but yeah,
Agreed.
essentially, I think it took a little bit for me in the book to realize, after that first chapter, reading about Jake Greenwood, for the next chapter, when we're reading about a different Greenwood character, it took me, I think, a second to realize, oh, this is her dad.
Yeah.
And then, as we go back, this is this person's mom, this is this person's dad. But it's just so interesting. And it's funny because 2038 in this book is so futuristic. Like there's only one forest left in the entire world and it's a tourist site. It's like the Disney World of nature.
Yeah.
And it's not that far off.
Yeah.
But I feel like when books, speak of the future in the far distance, it always seems far more advanced than it tends to end up being.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like people thought the year 2000 was going to be like so crazy, like so futuristic.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it
Yeah.
didn't really happen.
Yeah.
Actually, so when I was looking up reviews of this book after I finished reading it, I discovered that some, I guess it's considered a, climate fiction, which is like a new subgenre of fiction called climate fiction, which is, I guess, different than like post-apocalyptic, which I think is kind of its own thing. So I don't know. Anyways, I'd never heard that before, climate fiction. But also, how sad is that we have a whole genre of books based on like the catastrophes that shall befall us due to climate change? Like what?
That sounds pretty awful. That makes it sound like the future is super bleak.
Yes, it does. Honestly, when I was reading this book, I like found myself totally feeling really pessimistic about the world. Like, oh no, we are all in major trouble, which I like do think is true. But reading this book, I was really, and I feel like I was reading it during the summit in Glasgow, the like, what was it called? The environmental summit. Yeah, it's an acronym.
Anyway,
I was like reading it during that summit, just so I was like reading this book and then waking up and reading the news about how they like weren't getting anything done at that. And it was just like, oh no.
We are well on our way.
It definitely
to the Greenwood.
Yeah.
Solo first.
I was convinced really early in the book that that's our future. So hopefully not, obviously. Okay. Carrie.
Yes.
I think we all know the answer since you recommended this book to Nick and it became our book club book. Did you like the book?
Yes, I loved it.
Okay, me too. I loved it.
I love that you loved it.
I loved it. I literally loved it. And it's funny. And everyone had this reaction. If anyone listening has a hard copy, this book is really long. It's 500 pages and it's hefty. And when it came in the mail, I was like, oh no. And I was really worried about it because this is a wonky month because of the holiday. And I was like, I don't know if people are gonna have time to read this. I was worrying about having had time to read it. And then I started it and I read it in like 48 hours. I couldn't put it down. I absolutely loved it.
It's dense. When Nick said that he recommended it, I was like, oh, I'm really glad that you did because it's a great book, but it is really dense. And it's not like a book that you can not pay attention because so many things are happening and some of them are really subtle, but because of the tie, like through time and through this family, you do have to really like keep track of what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, you do. Well, and I mean, the book is also written like kind of as a mystery. Like it's really unclear what happened. This family tree is all messed up. And there's some question about heritage and lineage. And we don't really know how people are all related to each other. And so that like mystery of the story coupled with the fact there were tons of characters and it was all told backwards, it did make it confusing at points where I was like, whoa, who did what? Who is this? So there were definitely like those moments, but I think overall the storytelling was strong enough and it all came together in the end in a way that was really satisfying. So I think it was well done.
I agree. I think also, even though there are a lot of characters, I think the author does a really good job of not only developing the characters, but making them just feel very real.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I feel like probably one of the things I really liked about this book is that the characters, they just were complex and they embodied a lot about life, things that happened to them. And sometimes they were sad and sometimes they were good. And I felt like some of these characters were soul searching, but it just came off as very, very real.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ideas and thoughts that these characters had, I was like, wow, like that's very interesting. And just like, I can see people actually thinking that. So they did it was a great job, I think, on the characters.
For sure. I feel like every character we encountered was having like a serious moral dilemma that they were grappling with. Like each and every one of them had this sort of like this like good versus evil like choice to make.
Yeah.
And they were all really like conflicted about it. And yeah, it felt very realistic and very like raw And you could, I think, in almost all situations in this book, you could really see kind of like both sides of the argument. Like, well, they should probably do this, but like maybe they should do this other thing. I don't know. Like, you could have made the argument for both sides in every scenario, which is great writing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Like, I think, well, even the like, okay, now here's some spoiler alerts. If you haven't read this book yet and you're planning to, this is probably where you should cut out and go read it and then come back, because there's gonna be some spoilers starting now, because I want to talk about like like sort of the seed, the crux of the like moral dilemma in this book is whether or not Everett should have taken the baby.
Yep.
And I, as much as I like rooted for him, obviously, and like wanted to see them live happily ever after, I was kind of like, I don't think he's in the right. He needs to give that baby back. It's not his baby.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's the baby of like this, arguably like evil rich guy, like he wants it and he's the dad. Like I don't know. How did you feel about that like dilemma?
I was totally rooting for Everett as well, because as much as in the beginning when he first found the baby who we learn later to be Willow, like he didn't intend to keep her. He was totally just like on the run and could not provide a very safe environment for her. He's like jumping trains. He like doesn't really have food. He just like gives her to eat whatever he has. Sometimes it's like a jar of honey. And it's like, okay, so is this best for Willow? Like what is Everett's like real intention here? And it's like I see that he thinks he's doing the right thing. At the same time, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like he did find Willow like in the woods, like by herself. So it's like if he hadn't found her, she probably would have died. So it's like, well, whoever left her there, or like that environment wasn't safe for her. So it's like I feel really bad for Willow, because it made me think like, wow, this is like a floating little baby, and like no one knows what to do with her. And
Yeah.
it was a dilemma that was very hard to choose a side on.
Yeah, I agree. But I struggled with it through the whole book because I kept thinking, he kept really wanting to root for Everett and having the baby. And I was, but I also like didn't know if I fundamentally thought that he was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Which was like, again, like I think great writing. And it's sort of like for me made the whole book feel kind of wonky, like feel a little bit like a house of cards. Like all of these people's belief systems are built upon these like morals and these like dichotomies that they have established for themselves as like their ethics or whatever. And I don't know, like the whole book felt like, okay, this could really go either way, or this whole thing could come toppling down.
Yeah. I think I really like that you used the word dichotomy, because I think all of these main characters also had the dichotomy of like doing what was best for them, like what they thought was best, and like not wanting to hurt other people.
Yeah.
Because like I feel like a lot of these characters, like you said, like they're doing what they think is very righteous and correct and the way things should be, but they are pained in thinking that they may hurt other people. And I feel like there are really painful moments in this book that are realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that plays even more so into the drama, I guess, of, what these characters do with their lives, which then affect the next generation of the family so much.
Well, and it's that idea too, which I think is, listen, I'm not a psychologist or an anthropologist or anything, but like, I know that there is this theory that like generational trauma is passed down. So it felt like it was like a little bit about that too, of like, well, if the grandfather, had this traumatic experience and was this way, then the daughter's going to be, the mom's going to be this way. And then, it's just like, we all impact each other, like all the way down the line.
Yeah. I didn't think of that. That's so true. And kind of scary, because you think what you do not only impacts your life, but it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to, impact all these future generations. But I guess when,
Yeah.
well, I would say in this book, these characters are faced with a lot more heavy choices than I would say like the normal person would have, but
Yeah.
also very
Fair.
realistic. Like a lot of people go through different things, and how they handle it determines like the rest of their life. It's crazy.
It's
Life is
crazy.
crazy.
Life is crazy. All right. First sentence. And there's kind of two, which I actually like when this happens. So the first sentence is, they come for the trees. And that's it. They come for the trees. And then, so that's just kind of a little forward. And then the first actual chapter is titled God's Middle Finger, which is amazing. And the sentence is, as first light trickles through the branches, Jake greets this morning's group of pilgrims at the trailhead.
I mean, I think the first one, they come for the trees. Like, I'm in. Like, you got me.
You got me.
I'm like, it just I'm picturing like this godly cathedral of like towering trees and something that's majestic. And I don't know, it's just such a simple sentence, but it seems to evoke so much grand emotion and respect for these giant plants. I don't know how he does it, but then what threw me in the second first sentence was when the author refers to pilgrims, and I stupidly think of pilgrims as coming over on the Mayflower. And so my first thought was like, wait, what year is this? Like, what is going on? And I had to like read a couple more sentences to understand, like, okay, we're talking about like a pilgrimage, like people coming to see something that is, seemingly holy, or, I don't know, a place like a tourist attraction, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But again, I think in that the first sentence introducing Jake so quickly, you're really drawn into the story right away.
Yeah, you really are. I was sucked in immediately. And in fact, I was so sucked in with Jake's story that I was really kind of mad when we transitioned, which happened, I'm trying to find it, when we jumped to the next year. I was like, no, like already? I'm not ready yet. Like, no. We went to 2008. So from 2038 to 2008.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could have read so much more about Jake and this future world where there's no trees. Like I could have spent the whole book in there. But so I was kind of mad, and I was kind of like, oh no, like it can't possibly be this good the rest of the way through.
Yeah. And then
but it actually was. Yeah. And then every year was like just as enthralling as the last one.
Yeah.
Which was very impressive.
I felt the same a little bit, because when it shifted, I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Yeah. And we are, okay, now we're on the next stage. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to have, I was really getting into the character of Jake, and now I'm going to have to learn a whole new set, and, I'm going to have to really figure stuff out. But it was really done well, I would say. It was pretty seamless. And it sounds like this book would be confusing and being written with so many jumps, but it's really not.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep the like broad strokes of the story. But I mean, we've said a couple of times, like we did get lost occasionally, but yeah, I think overall, like the arc is clear. It's like I think the language is different in each section, like, because we're looking at, it's a different time. It's like a different, I don't know, like it was very clear for me which era we were in.
I could see that.
And so that made it easier to follow. Yeah, they come for the trees. I mean, there were some really beautiful language in this book. There were some lines that I just thought were really lovely. And there's at one point, Jake says to like her group of pilgrims, she says, this tree is older than the language I'm thinking in.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about. Like if you're looking at, 1,000-year-old tree or whatever, like that's wild.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point in that Michael Christie also did a good job of adding like historical anecdotes into this book, because like you just said, for Jake to point out that it's 2038 and these trees are older than the language that she's speaking, it's just very thought-provoking what she brings up. And then also for the author to, have this fictional relevance to that time, but he does it throughout all the other years. Like he talks about, in the 70s with Willow, just a lot of the hippie movement and like the stand up against the man kind of, I don't know, I guess what I would call it, a political thought at the time. And then in the 30s as well, he talks about like the Great Depression, and it's really cool that he does such a good job of talking about the times. Not only are the characters really well developed, but the time frame in which the jumps take place are really well developed.
Hey everyone, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. Backed by popular demand, I'm excited to let you know that new episodes of the Hyman Podcast will drop every other Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're going to continue the conversations we started last season and keep having those hard conversations. There is so much in store for you this season, and I'm excited to share it with you. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single moment. The Hyman Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Okay, here's a line that I really loved on page 101. I mean, what's a bookshelf's purpose other than to quietly remind one's guests of one's superior intellect? So I'm like, whole living room is a bookshelf. So I'm like, oh, wow.
Hey.
Sure. She sits chain-smoking menthols, shivering in the air conditioning, her dress stuck to her like cling wrap, the sweat from her sun-baked journey pooling in the cavities made by her collarbones. And because there was quite likely dairy in the muffin she bought in desperation at that gas station, her stomach churns.
Oh, I love it. There are
It's beautiful.
so many great sentences in this book. And it's funny that you chose one that talked about the intolerance for dairy, because it's like a funny thing that all of the members in the family have this sensitivity.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before. Wait, so who else in the family does?
Okay, so Willow did. I remember when Everett first took Willow, he figured out that like she just threw up I think he gets like goat's milk or something and tries to feed her, and she like throws it up. And then when he's
no, the goat's milk is the only thing she can drink.
Oh,
cow's milk.
maybe it was cow's milk, yeah. And he's like taken to jail, and he hears them with Willow like in another room, and he's like, no, she don't give her milk. I think Liam, I can't quite remember exactly, but I want to say that Liam also had a sensitivity towards it too. But anyway.
Oh, okay, this is amazing. Then comes the uncanny sound that Temple Van Horn will surely never forget, not in all of her life. 10,000 books drawn up into the sky all at once.
That part was so interesting. It was so...
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Like that she's got this library. I mean, this book is about trees, obviously. Like I feel like this book is about anything that a tree is made of, which includes books, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And in the like future world, books like printed books are really rare now. Like they don't make them anymore. Like they're collector's items. They're very valuable because there's like no more trees, so there's no more paper to print books on.
Yeah, it's
wild.
It is really wild, just the amount of metaphors with trees and paper and all of the things that come from trees. This book is awesome.
And I feel like throughout the book too, there were like all these like analogies that involve trees. It's like every character was described as like kind of some kind of tree, and like there was so much tree language and like nature language, and like it was so pretty.
It's so pretty.
It was really lovely.
Yeah,
really lovely to read. What was your favorite like year or time period to read about?
Let me think. I really liked the storyline of Everett on the run with Willow. It was just really the way that Everett describes baby Willow is, I guess for me, because I have a baby, but at the time, I found it so endearing how this man just knows
Oh,
nothing about having a baby and a family. And yet he's
yeah.
really trying his best. And he like describes her as, she looked up at me and just smiled her gummy smile, or she's fed something by him, and he describes her as like she smacked her lips together in a satisfaction. I don't know, just the way that he described her, you could see the
Mhm.
love starting, and I
Aw.
thought that was really precious,
Mhm.
and that was really fun to read about. um
Yeah.
it was also really interesting to read Jake, obviously because it's in the future, and the way that
Yeah.
this future is described is just, it's it's so far-fetched, but in a way it's not. And I love how she described how these pilgrims would come, and they would all have their phones and they'd take selfies with the trees. And I was like, that is
Yeah.
hilarious, because we think of trees are just this like everyday things, but in the future they're so scarce that people will be wanting to take selfies with them. And I thought it was funny how he elaborated on like the social media of aspect of our world, and he even used that for
Yeah.
2038.
Mhm.
um and then it was also interesting with Jake because she went through this struggle with trying to figure out, does she own this forest, and then like her, like you said, her moral dilemma of knowing exactly what to do. That was really cool, because I think her dilemma was very much, I mean, it was the last step into the future, so in some ways it felt like the full circle aspect of this family, because at the time, she's not married, she doesn't have kids, so we don't know yet what the future generation is. So at this point in time, like, she is the last of the Greenwood family. And
Mhm.
so I liked that part of her story being kind of like, she gets the forest back and it's like still hers and in the family.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the end.
Okay.
So in the end, it probably isn't actually related to Harris Greenwood.
I guess theoretically not by blood.
Right.
Yeah.
So what see again here we like have this extreme ethical problem, which is like, what is the right thing to do? Is the
Hmm.
right thing to do to pretend that she is related to them to try to take control of this island and save these trees? Or is the right thing to do to recognize that, that's a fantasy, that's not real, and to leave it be?
I think, and it seems like a lot of this book is, filled with this tree and forest metaphor. I mean, she ultimately proved that she was going to take care of the trees on this island better than anybody else. She showed her perceptive care for the trees, and she was noticing, like, this tree is kind of brown, like needs to be taken care of differently, whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she was perceptive in a way.
Yeah, three of the trees on the island were growing a fungus, and she was
Yes.
concerned, or they were like turning brown. Yeah, and I think they had a fungus. And she was afraid that like it was going to spread and kill all of the trees in the
Right.
forest.
And she was like, "Oh, I think we should shut everything down. So like we take care of these trees, but we know that the island will never do that because they make so much money from these pilgrims coming here."
Right.
And
Hmm.
but I don't know, she proved that she was going to do what was best for the trees. And therefore I personally felt that she should have ownership of it, because even if she's not related by blood, she has the, I don't know, the weight of responsibility that is necessary in order to keep this place to go into the future. And also, she's not related by blood, but I guess she, to me, still feels like the descendant in line, because of like people being raised by other people. And it's like, okay, maybe they're not their mom, but like they might as well be their mom, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that
So,
question of like, what makes you family, right? Is it blood,
ugh.
or is it, you know, your
Yeah, like your
experience?
experience, yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's both. I don't know. I mean, yeah, to your point, this book raises that question very well.
Yeah, it really does. And then the book really does end without us having much of a resolution. Jake basically she keeps the diary. She keeps her grandmother's diary that says, or her great grandmother? I can't remember. Great grandmother's diary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it would have been the woman.
Willow's mom. Right. Okay.
Yeah,
so she
Willow's
keeps
mom.
her great grandmother's diary, which contains the like shaky at best evidence that she is the daughter of R. Holt, who died without descendants, and so his corporation owns the island where she works, the like tree sanctuary. And so if she can prove that she's his daughter using this diary, she will inherit the tree sanctuary and, you know, she would be really, really rich and she would have all this stuff. So she basically takes the diary, she keeps it, doesn't give it back, doesn't burn it, but then she leaves the island and she just sort of like walks off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
What's she going to do?
I took it to mean that she kept the diary as, I guess I assumed that meant she would use it to prove that she was the daughter of this like millionaire.
You think so?
That's what I thought. But
okay.
I guess.
Yeah, I think it's up for interpretation.
Yeah,
totally.
It is. Yeah, now that I think about it, it is up for interpretation.
Which is kind of infuriating. I think people at book club are going to hate that. After 500 pages, you can't tell us what happens. But I actually thought it totally worked. And I'm not too angry about it. Although I do wish we could ask Michael Christie, like, what does she do?
Yeah.
What does Jake do?
It's like the classic when, you know, I'm thinking of the movie Inception where like at the end, like the top is spinning. People are like, oh, is it going to tip over?
Ooh, yes,
or
yes,
is
yes.
it like wavering or is it not wavering? Like, is this a dream? Is this not a dream? But it's like the full movie up until that point, you know, kind of paints this picture where it's like, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what this ending felt like to me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the history of it up until this point, that's really the story. I don't know. There's room for a sequel. That's all I'll say.
I know there is room for a sequel. I wonder if we will get one.
Yeah.
He's only written a couple of books. This is like really his second book. His other one is called, which I just put it on my Amazon wish list. Family, please check that out for the holidays. It's called If I Fall, If I Die. And it has like good reviews. He's a Canadian writer. Also, apparently Michael Christie says, his bio says, a former carpenter and homeless shelter worker, Christie divides his time between Victoria and Galiano Island, British Columbia, where he lives with his wife and 2 sons in a timber frame house that he built himself.
Wow.
So I feel like he really does live on the island, like in the story.
So another book that we read in book club, 2 books actually, we read Station 11 and Glass Hotel.
Yeah.
And those were by Emily St. John Mandel. And she was Canadian, I want to say, for whatever reason.
I think that's right.
When you were reading Michael Christie's like biography, I was like, wow, sounds just like Emily St. John Mandel. I wonder if they know each other and they're Canadian friends. But
ooh, I bet they do.
Yeah.
I think all Canadians know each other, right?
Probably, yes.
I think so. Yeah, this book definitely has Station 11 vibes.
Yeah,
I feel like it's like it's a more like literary Station 11. Like, I don't think this book is as accessible as Station 11, in part because of its length, but also because of its language and its character count. And there's just, I think this is like Station 11 on steroids.
Yeah. Yes,
a little bit.
This is definitely, I would say, a little bit more of an advanced book.
Yeah. And interestingly, like I had never heard of this book. I was not familiar with it, which was really fun because I feel like a lot of times when we draw books out of a hat, I know a lot of them. Because they're, we tend to suggest books that we have come across recently or that were Reese Witherspoon book club books or whatever. And this one I was completely 100% unfamiliar with. So that was really cool. And then to be so surprised by how much I liked it was like such a treat. Because this came out in February 2020. So maybe that's why it didn't get, I mean, maybe there's just too much going on in the news cycle and this book got totally railroaded by the pandemic.
It could be.
Really?
I didn't even realize that this book was so new of a book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, I feel really with it.
You're so with it.
I'm so with it.
Also, in an interview with Interview magazine, Michael said, people have called this novel dystopian, which I'm a little uncomfortable with because it's really not that far in the future.
Ooh, but
Yeah.
it's not, that's what I was saying in the beginning. 2038 is not that far in the future.
No.
But a world in which we have no trees seems very far in the future.
So I thought that was kind of cool. And apparently he like is advocating, like he's actively doing work in Canada to like save the trees, which is really cool.
Yeah. Can you imagine a world without trees? It would be so barren.
Wild. Yeah.
It is wild. Yeah, it's super wild. And just, yeah, I guess I would call that dystopian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, like that part of the story is really only like a fourth of this book, or maybe less than that, a fifth.
Yeah.
Like most of the book really happens in the past in a normal world, you know, like basically our world.
Yeah. I feel like the majority was like 1934 and 1908 to me.
Mm-hmm. Definitely 1934, I think, got the most love.
Yeah.
We didn't spend a lot of time in 2008 really at all. But I actually thought his chapters were so sad and like moving and amazing. That's Liam Greenwood, who is like the estranged father of
Jake. Yeah.
Jake.
And he's also like the lost child, not lost child, but like I was really sad also by his relationship with Willow and how Willow's like activism made him kind of just live on the road as a kid. And just like, it seemed he struggled with being grounded.
Yeah, he definitely did. Yeah, he definitely did. It also really, it had me thinking a lot about like van culture now, you know, like she's living in her van in 1974, but like now people are living in their vans again. Like it's now again cool to live in your van. And like there are probably kids who are going to like grow up in a van.
Yeah.
Again. Isn't that interesting?
That is true.
It's like sounds kind of fun, but also like so terrible.
I feel like it would come down to how your parent or parents, you know, I feel like in some ways it'd be really amazing. And you like drive all over and see all these great things, and what an amazing education that is. But I feel like it could also very much not be a healthy environment for a kid if the parent doesn't do a good job of like making sure they're like still relevant and connected to the real world.
Yeah. And I feel like kind of the point of living in your van is that you aren't connected to the real world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe not for everyone, but I think that's definitely part of it, right? Like you get to like get off the grid and like go see nature or whatever. Yeah. This book is so dense, like you said at the very beginning. It's extremely dense. There's a lot going on. There's a really interesting relationship, like gay relationship between two of the characters in 1934, which was obviously like not okay, and they had to keep it on the down low, and like, but it was so interesting to read about and like so heartbreaking and sad. There's all of this relationship like stuff between Everett and Temple, who's like this amazing character. She's like this Wild West Annie Oakley lady who has her own farm, and she's feeding like all the local vagrants, and she's famous for it, but it makes the townspeople hate her. And it's just like, just amazing character after amazing character. Incredible relationship development after incredible relationship development. Like we haven't touched it all on what was his name? The guy who gets addicted to opioids.
Is that Lomax? Yeah,
Harvey Lomax. Yeah, like Lomax's story is so
Everyone's
sad.
story is amazing.
And that character is awful. Yeah, like, it's just, it's really like every page tugs at your heartstrings. And I cried at the line I know I found it in here, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find it right now. But it's basically, so Temple's like farm gets destroyed in a tornado, and she's like homeless and like has nowhere to go and like nowhere to live. And then she comes back to like visit her property, and she finds like all of this money that people have left her. And it says like, oh, what does it say? It says, for the lady who with the table on her porch. And that just really got me. I was like, oh, the world is good. Like people are nice. Like people are essentially good.
Yeah, you know what? I forgot about that. And that was such a beautiful storyline for her. And I feel
Yeah.
like also this book does a really good job of just talking about, different classes of people. You've got the billionaire, I forgot his name. He's like Harvey, I think.
Holt.
Or no, I'm sorry, you're right, Holt. But then you've got, Everett,
Yeah.
who's, he has nothing. And then, these people
Mhm.
who are down and out on their luck, and they need to rely on Temple for like just a hot free meal. And then we're back to Jake, who's, potentially on the cusp of, claiming this huge fortune. And I don't know, I liked that there were all these different classes of people with different backgrounds and money. And it's just such an, I don't know, I can't say enough about how good this book is.
Yeah. It's so good. Oh, this is a good line. Page 391. Yet in his long, tortured, and grasping life, Harvey Bennett Lomax will have witnessed only the opposite. Oh, sorry. I didn't read the earlier part, but this is really what I'm trying to read. In his experience, the harder things get, the worse we treat one another. And the worst things we'll ever do, we save for our families.
Oh, my heart. It's so true. It's true though.
Which, like,
they always say like you hurt the ones
yeah.
that like you love the most, or like that are closest to you. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
it's so heartbreaking. What a
Mhm.
heartbreaking reality.
Yeah. Super sad. Super sad. And I do feel like also these characters, like almost all of them, are really pushed to the breaking point at some point where they like are struggling to survive, like to actually survive,
Mm-hmm.
which is just an incredible place to put all of your characters. I mean, there's no better story to tell than the story of like 10 different people struggling to survive. It's just, yeah, brilliant. This book, brilliant.
Super brilliant.
Super brilliant. I can't believe it didn't get more attention. Everyone should read it. It's amazing.
5 out of 5.
Yeah. I definitely think this is a 5-star for me. Mm-hmm.
I gave it a 5-star.
Did you?
I did.
I haven't rated yet, but that's what I'm thinking too.
It's a coveted spot.
Anything you wanted to talk about we didn't touch on? I mean, I know there's probably a lot. This book is a lot.
I totally forgot about the gay relationship. Oh my gosh, there was so much in that.
Yeah.
There was so much, I feel like, in the 1908 and the 1934 sections. There was so much, I felt like, in the unsaid. There were times where Everett and his brother like don't speak, but yet there's so much said in their silence. I don't know. There was just so much that was just like left unsaid. And that to me felt very profound. Yeah. Because I don't know, I feel like I talk a lot, and a lot of people like talk a lot, or maybe it's me, like I feel like I overexpress maybe sometimes. And I'm like, in 1908 and 1934, like these characters are just so stoic.
Yeah.
And
nobody can say what they are really thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I found that to be just so like deep.
Yeah. Well, especially like the male characters.
Yeah.
They're all really like confined within these like, hierarchies. And even the two brothers like can't communicate with each other enough to maintain a relationship. And they're like each other's only family.
Right.
And that's sad.
Yeah, it's sad. There were a lot of sad parts, but no, I would also recommend everyone to go read this book.
Wow. That's great. This one was awesome.
This one was awesome.
Good job, Carrie.
Oh, I can't take credit. It just
Yes, you
happened.
can.
Luckily, I mean, it was just lucky that Nick recommended it and I told him about it. But
Yeah. I feel
I
like
don't know,
Beth,
once in a
Beth is
while.
going to be mad because every book Beth picks, we tend to hate. And she's like, what the heck? I don't know why that always happens. It's
I'll
really
never
funny.
remember how she recommended David Sudeikis book, the holiday
David
book.
Sedaris. Yeah.
Sedaris, yes.
I think we all hated it.
And
And she was like, no, this is like a beloved book. We were like, I know,
and
but
it
we
was
still hated it.
there was just so many so politically incorrect and horribly mean things
Yeah.
about that book. It was just funny.
I know. Yeah. Oh
Anyway.
man, I need to figure out our holiday book. Also, I think this episode is going to come out on Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Or happy Black
Yes.
Friday. I guess probably people will be listening on Black Friday. So
No,
that's
this will
fun.
be good Thanksgiving dinner background music. Just listen to the podcast.
Just our voices. That's horrifying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Carrie, thank you so much. As always, I just love to talk to you, and I especially love to talk to you about books.
Same. Thank you so much for having me.
And happy Thanksgiving and happy reading.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving to you too.
Books with Brooks is produced by Mo Barrow with theme music by Jonathan Allen. Books with Brooks is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality professional shows that inspire and entertain. If you've been dreaming of hosting your own podcast, we can help. Please email content@pressplaypodcasts.com to get started today. Please be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.